All right, so I have again printed off a exam question so that way you guys can see how the content in the SciPad is then going to be asked in the end of your exam and also in the mocks as well. This one I have taken from the 2020 exam. So just FYI, if you're curious, it was the exam that the kids that are now year 13, I think, did it. This is a whole question, and this one is focusing on the pedigrees and the Punnett square. So we're looking at that sort of theory today. And this is going to be your second question on your mock for next week. So let's break apart this question and kind of decode the information and learn how to do pedigrees and Punnett squares. So here is an example of a pedigree. Pedigrees are designed just to show generational relationship. So this one here is often referred to our first generation or the parent generation. This is then usually referred to the second generation and then the third generation. So it goes through and we're just basically, it's like a family tree kind of thing. With this family tree, though, we want to look at some genetic information and see how things are being inherited. So this is a genetic disorder. So what that tells me is that this disease is inherited through your genes from your parent. It's not something that you get because you got a cold or flu or infection. It is just something that unfortunately you get because of DNA. This one is polycystic kidney disease. And what they have done is they have labeled affected and unaffected individuals. So if they are affected by this disease, they are shown in the dark color or the black. And if they are unaffected, they are shown as no color or in the white. So that helps us kind of figure out who is and is not affected in this family tree. Oh, Lucy, post it. I'm doing genetics today, so set a goal of what you want to work on. All right. The other thing to note when we're looking at these pedigrees is that we do label male and female. So in this case, the males are going to be the squares and the females are going to be the circles. Not terribly important for our analysis, but something that we keep in mind because especially next year, we might be talking about diseases that are linked to sex chromosome. So that's why that's kind of coming into play. All right. Now, what they tell us here is that the polycystic disease is caused by a dominant allele, which is the capital D, and the unaffected, so the non-diseased allele is recessive. So what that tells me is that if I inherit one of the disease alleles, I will have the disease since it's dominant. In other cases, it could be flipped the other way around, and if it's recessive, then you need to inherit both of them in order to have the disease. So this is unfortunate. We never really like it when the diseases are related to dominant alleles because it means you just need one to have the disease. If it was recessive, you need two, so your odds are a little bit better. Are we okay so far with that? All right. So in this first question here, they want us to complete the Punnett square for a cross between individual 1, and they tell me that individual 1 is homozygous recessive. That makes sense because they are undiseased, and the only way they can be undiseased is if they were little d, little d. And I'm making that annotation on there because I find annotating the question really helps me prepare it. Then they talk about individual 2, and they say individual 2 is heterozygous for the disease, so capital D, lowercase d. Are we good with that so far? All right. They want us just to fill in the Punnett square so that way we can look at what the likeliness is of the offspring having the disease. So this here is representative of the parent, the individual. So it doesn't matter which one you put at the top and which one you put at the bottom, so long as you have one of each. So that's just representing their genotype. This section here is representing their gametes, their sex cells. So you then split up the alleles. You have little d, big D, little d. And I'll make that annotation on there. So this is the parent's genotype. You guys are curious. And then this here and this here, those are representative of the gametes, which is our sex cells. Cool. Questions, concerns, comments at this point? No? All right, then I just pull down the letters to fill my Punnett squares. So, for example, this is a capital D. I'm going to move that across to these two. Getting your device, or is it a note? Do I have to log out? Huh? Log out of the computer? Yeah. Just leave it. I don't know how long you're going to be. All right, so I'm going to pull the capital D across, the lower D across, the lower D down, and then this little d down. Cool? I didn't do that too fast, right? Okay. Cool. All right, keep going. Okay. The next thing they want me to do for question B then is to list the genotypes of the following individuals. They want me to list the genotypes of individual number 3 and number 4. So that's those two over here. Number 4 is nice and easy for me to identify because I see that it has the recessive trait, and recessive is the little d, they're unaffected. Now I also then need to figure out what number 3 is. Now number 3 is a little bit trickier because it is affected, and there's basically two choices for anyone that's affected. It could be capital D, or capital D, lowercase d. How do you know that? Yeah, so we get this information from here. The only possibility is the heterozygous based on what their parents are. The other reason I know that this is capital D, lowercase d is that we have a recessive offspring, so they must be a carrier for the recessive trait. So that's how I figure out that guy. Huh? It couldn't have come from the female because the female's unaffected. So there's no way she can pass a capital D. Yeah.
But we'd have to explain more.
That I think is on the next page. Let's see. Yeah. Explain how you worked out the genotype for individual 3. And you should use your answers supporting both the parents and the children of individual 3. Yeah? If you want, you guys can do that yourself. Try to do your explanation, and then I can show you the marking schedule. Okay. Give it a go. Yeah, I have another one. Okay. Genetics people, FYI, that first question with the Punnett square, if you got that Punnett square correct, that was an achieved point. Second question here, if you got the identification of the genotype, that was also an achieved point. And what was also crazy was that with the correct genotype, they also allowed you to take it from the Punnett square. I'm not really sure what they mean by that, but apparently they're allowing you guys to kind of double dip on that. Okay. I can't quite remember what the breakdown of the points were for this question because I didn't photocopy it on there, but I'll look it up so you guys can see the breakdown. Actually, let's do that quickly. We want level 1 science. Oh, what did you do? That's new. Hi. Okay, yeah, just leave it on the side bench. Okay, I don't know why that has done that. Wash your hands? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me just show you guys the breakdown of points, because if you had answered those two things, I want to let you know what points you would be getting. Genetics 2020. There we go. This is question number 2. Here we go. Question. So the crazy thing, if you just answered by filling in that Punnett square and identifying the genotype of person 3 and person 4, that would be 2 achieved points, and that would actually get you an N2. What? Yeah, so you get an, you can, like, even if you don't answer the rest of the question, you still get 2 points. is what I want to point out to you guys. Okay? Remember how I said last week, little points do add up. Okay? So we're going to answer everything.
8 points in a question, right?
8 points in a question. So you already get 2. Okay. So let's talk about question C. So question C, you were talking about how we knew the genotype for number 3 was capital D, lowercase d. The achieved stuff, there are 3 different points that we're looking at for the achieved. The first thing that you could say is that you recognize that person number 3 is affected by the kidney disease. So that's just generic stuff. We know person number 3 is affected. The other one that you could have stated is parents number 2 and 3 pass down a dominant and a recessive allele to person number 3. All right. Last one for the achieved is recognizing that the individual number 7 inherited recessive alleles from both parents. So those are just generic statements, reading the pedigree and pulling some statements from it. Okay? So like I said, number 7, you can see that on the Punnett square, on the pedigree, that they're recessive. The second bullet point here, you would have found that from the Punnett square. So you just write down what you saw on the Punnett square, and this is just stating what you can read off of the pedigree. That is, they have the disease. All right. Most of you guys got that. Most of you guys also probably got 1 merit point. So in that explanation, they were looking at, could you justify looking at the parents, and if you could justify looking at the offspring. So if you justify talking about the parents and what the parents passed down to number 3, so recognizing that parent number 1 passed down the recessive, parent number 2 passed down the dominant, thus they inherited in that setup. So that was one way you could get that merit point. The other merit point that was in this question was explaining how individual 7 being recessive means that you then know that individual 3 must be heterozygous because they passed down a recessive allele. So each one of those was a merit point, ladies. If you got both of these merit points, that was basically converted into an excellence. So we need to talk about the generation before and the generation after. Cool? The other thing to check in your answers, Savannah, the other thing to check in your answers is to make sure you're using words like because and therefore, because that is the linkage words that we need, because that is the explanations. Okay? All right. Let's look then at our last question, just watching our time. And that is question D. So now we're starting to kind of think about things genetically and environmentally. So there's 2 reasons why we have certain traits. One reason is because of our genetics that we inherit. The second reason is influenced by our environment as well. So one of the members of the family has kidney failure, but this kidney failure is the result of an infection. Discuss if this type of kidney failure can be inherited by the future children. No. So 50-50 chance, you either answer yes or no, take a guess. If you take a guess, you should have, hopefully, an achieved point. So, states that this type of kidney failure is caused by the environment or the infection, not the genetics. So you guys automatically said to me, no. If you wrote that down, no, you get an achieved point. That's 3 achieved points, and now you have an A3. And you passed the question. Okay?
Yeah.
Easy peasy. Okay. Other things to keep in mind is breaking down the reasonings to why. So you could state that genetic traits are only passed on through the gametes, and this infection is not the result of any sort of alteration in genetics. It was just because of the environment you've been exposed to that pathogen, that bug that causes the kidney infection. And then this one here, so the kidneys are the ones that are going to be infected by this by the infection. The kidneys are not gametic cells, they are somatic cells. Somatic means body cells. And whatever happens in the somatic cells cannot be passed on to the offspring. So the only thing that's passed on to offspring has to be from the gametes. All right? That also means things like cancer. If I say, for example, get breast cancer, knock on wood, that doesn't happen, my offspring won't be at risk of getting breast cancer because that is in my somatic cells. So that is a mutation that has occurred in my body cells, and it's limited to affecting me. If, however, I'm a carrier for a breast cancer gene, that is then able to be passed on. So I inherited it when I was born, and then my offspring get it when they're born. So that is the difference between the two. Are we okay with that? All right. Let's see how this answer gets up to merit and then how it gets up to excellence. So there's two different points you could make in order to get to the merit. The first one is explaining that the children will not get the kidney failure. Is explaining that the children cannot get this genetic disease because, again, using that keyword because, it is not a genetically related disease. It is an environmental infection. Second bullet point is talking about how it only affects the somatic cells, cannot be passed on. So basically, it's what you guys would have for the achieved point. The difference is you are explaining it and you're using. Just gonna wait a second to make sure they're done. Okay, I think they're done. So you see here, this statement turns into a merit point when you start using the word because. Yeah? This statement here, again, starts turning into a merit point because now they're saying it's caused by. So we can easily push our grades up if we just use the word because. All right. The excellence here then is the same as the one before. We add the two bullet points together and that becomes the excellence. So it can potentially be quite easy and straightforward. It's just a matter of making sure your answers are clean. All right, questions, concerns, or comments? No? All right. Just want to show you guys the breakdown of the points because I didn't have a chance to print this because I don't want to print a whole page just for that. So achieved, 1 achieved point, N1, 2 achieved points, N2, 3 of them. There was a possibility of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There were 8 of them. 3 out of 8, you get a 3, and 4 out of 8. So half of the achieved points, you got an A4. So take a guess, write down definitions, write down observations if you're not sure how to answer it. All right. Merit, again, pretty generous. 1 merit point was an M5. There were a possibility of 4 in that question. For the M6, 2 merit points. There were, again, 4 out of the possibilities. Excellence is a little bit trickier, so be mindful of this one. They've made the excellence criteria harder. They want you to get both excellence points.
What if you get 1?
So if you get 1, then you would be getting an M6. Yeah.
1 and 2 merit points?
So N1 is 1 merit point, N6 is 2 merit points. There were 4 total possible. But you have to remember those 4 total possible, if you got 2 of the merit points together for these questions, it often upgraded you to the excellence point. Okay? So if you got this one at merit and you got this one at excellent, it kind of depends on how much of a merit answer that was. Because if you look here on the marking schedule, it says E7 is 2 excellence points with a minor admission. So you might have forgotten something. So I would take that as it probably means you got 3 merit points.
Okay.
Would be my guess. An excellence and 3 merits is what I would translate that into. And then if you got both excellence points, then that was an E8. Cool. Questions, concerns, comments? No? So for your SciPad related to it, it's written on that piece of paper. I'll scan it. I can't remember. It's the next section, basically. All right, return my things.